So I'm asking the question whether the Switch 2 is worth the upgrade over the Switch 1 or whether Nintendo's seemingly running out of ideas. This is Non-Techie, where we go through the world one gadget at a time, and I'm pleased to say we've got the Switch 2 here, and I just wanted to review it just to answer the question, is it worth your hard-earned money, and how much of an upgrade is it above your Switch 1 if you do already own one? Okay, so speaking about design and hardware, first and foremost, coming from the Nintendo Switch 1 OLED, this new device, the Switch 2, just screams upgrade, and the images don't quite do it justice. There's now significant heft to the console, and whilst it's significant, it's not overbearing. The Joy-Cons are slightly larger and more comfortable to hold, and they now attach magnetically rather than slide on, and they feel more like premium add-ons in the way they articulate flush with the body, whereas on the Switch 1, the Joy-Cons felt slightly flimsy sliding in. Both the body and Joy-Cons have a comfortable and pleasing matte texture to them too. And of course, there's the larger screen. Now, I have to be honest, the screen, though increased from 7 to 7.9 inches, does leave room for some things to be desired, and that's especially if you're coming from the revised OLED screen of the Switch 1. The Switch 2 screen is an LCD display, so its method for displaying images involves a backlight layer contributing to brightness, with an additional LCD layer on top of it determining colour. What this means in practice is, at least compared to OLED screens, LCD screens should have longer lifespans, better energy efficiency, higher refresh rates, and better brightness in outdoor environments. The revised Switch 1 possesses an OLED display, with each pixel having the functionality to change its colour and brightness individually, meaning where the image is meant to be pure black, an OLED screen completely switches those pixels off, giving images greater contrast. So overall for me, Nintendo have knocked the design out of the park, but the screen, I wish it was an OLED screen if I'm going to be honest. I've got a slight preference for them. I do appreciate the punchy colours, I do appreciate the greater contrast that they provide. That said, in a hybrid system that people take on the go, I can understand why they've made the trade-off to go for an LCD screen, and it's also a lot cheaper for them to manufacture. So in terms of new features, the Switch 2 not only has a larger screen, but it's a higher resolution screen, outputting 1080p in handheld and up to 4K when docked. The screen also has a variable refresh rate supporting up to 120Hz for smoother gameplay. It has HDR10 support for vibrant and realistic visuals. And of course, the Switch 2 has now more internal storage at 256GB. There's an improved kickstand to improve stability whilst placed on a flat surface, and it also contains dual USB ports enabling more flexibility when charging and connecting accessories. There's also a built-in microphone with noise and echo cancellation, and lastly there's enhanced audio with downward firing speakers for improved sound. One thing you immediately notice is that the Switch 2 will make your current library of Switch 1 games run really well, and that's due to the additional horsepower that the Switch 2 comes with. For comparison, I have The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, and it plays at 30 frames per second docked on the Switch 1, but manages to double its frame rate on the upgraded Switch 2 edition. And there's probably no better example of the Switch 2's headroom than when you visit the Korok Forest, and this was an area notorious for impeding performance on the older system. On the Switch 2, it's butter, even with the upgraded resolution up to 1080p. Now moving over to Switch 2 exclusive titles, Mario Kart World is Nintendo's flagship release for this launch, and it brings with it all of Nintendo's gameplay fun and polish. In terms of performance, Mario Kart World meets 60 frames per second both in docked and handheld mode. In summary, the Switch 2 is not pushing the envelope in terms of graphics and performance across the gaming ecosystem, but it has closed the gap somewhat and is quite impressive for a hybrid console. Speaking of cons, there aren't too many, and there's one I'll probably leave to the end of this video, but there are a couple to pick out. One is battery life. Depending on the type of game you're playing, you can reach between 2 to 3 hours of battery life on the go, so if you're on a long flight and you plan to take your Switch, you probably should take a charger with you. There's also an issue with the plastic layer on top of the screen. So Nintendo advised that this is a protective layer. It's likely to make the display shatterproof, but at the same time it's already peeling away, despite nothing having picked away at it. So this is slightly concerning. For a device that costs so much, you'd think they'd use materials that were a bit more weatherproof than this. So this leads me to the verdict and recommendation. Now, the hardware upgrades are much welcome, and I'm glad to see Nintendo slightly buck the trend of lagging behind its competitors, particularly when it comes to hardware innovation, because they provide a feature set that should really see this console last for the next 5 to 10 years, we hope. That said, the real experience comes down to the titles available on the system, and at launch, apart from Mario Kart World and Fast Fusion and maybe a couple of others I'm forgetting, there's really a paucity of original titles, true launch titles available. Despite this, the Switch 2 seems to have delivered the fastest launch of any games console within its first month, shipping about 5 million units and eclipsing the previous record held by the PlayStation 4. That said, apart from titles, the major consideration is cost. So the MSRP for the console is about $450 US, and Mario Kart World retails around $80. So consoles and games are costing a pretty penny, and a big concern for me is around a precedent it may set for other platforms. So on balance, from the OLED Switch that I have to the Switch 2, I would say the Switch 2 is worth the upgrade. And I don't think Nintendo have run out of ideas at all. Nintendo last generation, they hit a winning formula by converging their home and handheld systems into one brand, and this really enabled them to focus their development targets and provide an unrivaled gaming experience. And Nintendo really have zigged where Microsoft and Sony have zagged, so there's no real need for them to revolutionize their ecosystem that they created last generation. That said, the appeal of the Switch 2 will largely be down to the experiences that are to come. Right now, it's got the makings of a good console for this generation, but we'll see the true measure of its capabilities once we get Nintendo's new experiences down the line. And that's it from me. If you like this video and found it informative, please give this video a like. And if you want to see more, please do subscribe. It will give me an excuse to pinch my brother's Switch. Okay, I'm out.